Please stand for the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Cecily, roll call, please.
Counselor Gorley.
Here.
Counselor Richards. Counselor Sanchez.
Here.
Counselor Thorstad. Counselor Trask.
Here.
President Pro Tem Mueller.
Here.
Mayor Coleman.
Present. Let the record show that we have 6 counselors present
I have to
and
do
1
ours, too.
absent, and then
Sorry.
Angela is going to do hers.
Apparently I didn't have mine on. Okay. Commissioner Journey.
Present.
Commissioner Wolthius.
Here.
Commissioner White.
Here.
Commissioner Melcher.
Here.
Commissioner Graybill.
Here.
And Commissioner Wood. So we have 5 in attendance, 1 absent. So we have a quorum.
Thank you. I just want to thank the Planning Commission to making it tonight and for being here to make this joint meeting happen. So appreciate your guys' presence and counselors as well, taking the time out of your schedule to come to this meeting. It's an important meeting. We are going to open up a work session regarding the transportation system plan. And because we only have 60 minutes, I'm requesting that we just let Garth go through his presentation and save our questions to the end. So just keep track of things you'd like to ask questions about and we'll circle back, but we have limited time on that. So I'm just going to hand it over to Garth and kick it off.
Yeah, well, I can introduce him. So this is Garth Aponitis from DKS Associate. They are our consultants for the transportation system plan, and he's going to be kind of presenting the work session. We've already been doing a lot of work up until this point to get to this point, and so we're rounding the final lap here. And so bringing you both together to kind of walk through the last bit of questions maybe that you may have before we start drafting the final. So appreciate you all being here. Garth, go ahead.
All right. Thank you, Angela. And thank you everyone for being here tonight. Appreciate you taking the time to be here and listen and provide any comments or questions you might have. All right. So tonight we're here just to give you a preview. As Angela mentioned, it's things that we've been working on for the last year plus, but we want to give you a quick primer, get you up to speed, and start thinking about any hot items or things we might want to be working on or polishing up before this comes back to you early in the new year. There will be another work session, and then we're going to be moving ahead into the adoption phase after that. And so, as Angela noted, we've got a lot of work behind us so far, and we've got some good input from the community, but we also want to hear from you and be sure that we're checking all the boxes and hitting all the things we need to hit in order to make both of these plans successful. So I've got about 20 or so slides here that I'll run through, give you an overview of those things, and then there'll be lots of time for questions and discussion. All right, so the 4 key areas I'm going to hit on, give you an overview of these 2 projects, talk more about those, some of the goals that we're using to help guide our work. I'll give an overview of some of the transportation needs that we've analyzed from the data and that we've heard from the community, and then also we'll be talking about next steps. All right. So as I noted, there's really 2 different plans and 2 different projects that we're working on in tandem here. And while they're related and they both have similar elements, including a focus on transportation, they are 2 very distinct pieces. And so I want to be sure I clarify that. So first of all, we're going to be talking about the Transportation System Plan, or the TSP. And that is a citywide plan that covers the entirety of the city within the urban growth boundary. Looking at everything that's inside the city limits today, as well as the surrounding areas for growth and what we think is going to be within the city limits in the next 20 or so years as our planning horizon goes. That's a citywide document. And then the North Sweet Home Area Plan is an area plan that I've got a map I'll show you here in a little bit, but this is a little bit different, more focused look on the north area of town, north of the rail, which is an area that we all know has a lot of opportunities for future development. And along with that future development, there's a variety of needs and opportunities with it. And so we're taking a closer look at that, and then aligning that with the transportation system plan as well, so that as the north side of town develops successfully, that can be tied into the rest of the system as well. And so Again, the key thing is there's really two separate processes we're going through, but we're doing them in conjunction together. So a transportation system plan, there's a number you can see on the bullets there. There's a number of things that it's required to have from state law. But really there's two key things. Number one, it's the document that should serve as the overall city's transportation master plan that helps guide those transportation decisions. So you can anticipate those future needs and better understand how you're going to address the existing needs that you have. That's one part of it. The other part of it, which is extremely important, is that that you have the future projects identified in that plan, so that as money becomes available, regardless of where that source of money is coming from, and in many cases now it could be grant opportunities as well. You need to have those projects identified so that you can be eligible for some of those grants and some of those other funding sources. So that's a really key, important aspect of the plan. Even if there's some projects where, looking right now, we might not think that there's going to be money in 10 years or 20 years for those projects. It's still important to memorialize the need and the idea in the plan, so that if money does become available, it doesn't hold you up and create issues later down the line. Let's go to the next one. All right, so then an area plan has a bit of a broader focus than a transportation system plan. In a second, I'll show that the area that we're looking at for the North Sweet Home area. But as part of that, we're also looking at a variety of land uses. So across the overall city, under the existing zoning and comprehensive plan, we have an idea about what kind of future uses are likely given the zoning and the allowed land uses. So that's pretty set for most of the city. However, in the North Sweet Home area, where there's a lot more development potential, that's where there's more variables at play. A lot of it will come down to what are the opportunities, what's the market going to look like, what does an adjacent property do, where is partnering feasible, and how will some of those things play out? And so that's a much wider open slate there. We'll be talking about that a little bit as well. Actually, yeah. So on the map here, I just wanted to point out this area that we talk about when we were talking about the North Sweet Home area. And so again, it's really this area that's north of the rail line. On the western edge, it's looking at 18th Avenue, and then it goes out to Wiley Creek over on the eastern edge. Then on the northern edge, it goes all the way up to the river. And so there's a lot of area. As you know, some of that area has various constraints between wetlands and flooding, and other challenges, but it's a large area overall that we're looking at. All right, and I'll touch on this again at the end, but just a little context of where we are in the process. We're getting up to the stage where we're starting to put together the list of projects and ideas that will compose the plan. We'll be soon moving into draft plans here in the fall and early winter, and then we'll be rounding the turn for an adoption process early in the next calendar year. All right. So the project goals and objectives. A lot of times people kind of overlook this or don't get as excited thinking about goals and objectives, but it's really important for this process because at some point as we're going through the process, we need to make decisions. Do we select choice A or choice B? And so having these established goals and objectives is helpful because it helps us confirm that we're maintaining alignment with the stated purpose of what we're trying to achieve. So that is really important that we're using these. Let's go to the next slide. Currently, there's one transportation goal in the comprehensive plan. That one transportation goal has 9 different policies, which address various aspects. A lot of the focus in the policies has to do with maintenance of the system and management of the system, but there are 9 different policies. Next slide. And so as we're going through this process, one of the things we're looking at is breaking out five different transportation goals and helping to to verbalize each of those more clearly so they stand alone. And you'll see different cities around the state. It's pretty typical to have I'd say 5 to 10 transportation goals is pretty common. There's a lot of there's if you look at different transportation goals around the state, there will be a lot of commonalities and similarities, but in other cases, you might have goals that are combined or worded a little bit differently, just so you can better fit the character and desired culture of the city that we're working with. So if you can go back to that real quick, Adam. So again, those are the 5 that we're looking at, which generally cover the spectrum, but there's certainly opportunities to bring in other goals too, if there's a desire to do that. All right, let's go to the next one. So I have about 5 or 6 slides here where we'll give an overview of some of the analysis we've done and some of the things we've heard from the community. And the way that these slides are generally broken up is based on mode of travel. So first, and I'll talk a little bit about each of these, giving you an overview, and then happy to come back later and address questions once we get to the end. So we collected a variety of transportation system inventory and data set as part of the effort over the last number of months. One of those was looking at the pedestrian system and specifically sidewalks, and we really focused on the higher level facilities, and so the collector and arterial system. This was not exhaustive. We did not do every single local street, the smaller local roads within neighborhoods. We really focused on those larger streets, on the collectors and arterials. And so we went through an inventory and identified as part of that key system framework where gaps exist. And that for the most part is a pretty straightforward exercise. As you can see on this map, the red indicates that sidewalks are missing on both sides. Yellow is sidewalks missing on one side, and so certainly on the eastern edge of the city, with the exception of Main Street, there's a lot of gaps along Long Street and some of the other north-south streets as well. All right, let's go to the next slide. So we also took a similar look at bicycle facilities, again focusing on collectors and arterials. Bicycle facilities are a little trickier than sidewalks because it's not just is there a sidewalk there or not. There's some facilities where you might have bike lanes, but there's other facilities where you might not need a bike lane. In some cases, if you have low traffic volumes and slow moving traffic volumes, it can be acceptable to have a bike sharing the roadway with the vehicles. So it really comes down to context and location. So the way that we help, or there's a process that we go through to evaluate how is the system operating for cyclists, and that's called a level of traffic stress, or LTS. And what that level of traffic stress thinks about or gets at is based on all the combinations of the environment, what's the type of the facility are you on? Is it a bike lane? Is it shared roadway? Is it an off-street path? What's the volume of traffic vehicles? What's the speed of traffic vehicles? Is there any separation from the traffic vehicles? There's a lot of different factors that it looks at. And what it looks at then is that it's the resulting is a score from 1 to 4. Level 1 is ideal. That means you could have kids go out there and use the facility without any concern for the kids. So young kids. 4 gets up to 4. 4 is a pretty rough facility. Only that the people that will bike anything that are totally fearless would ride on something like a 4. A 2 is what we typically try to achieve in transportation planning, where a 2 is something that would be that most adults would find that a comfortable facility. It's not just you don't have to be an avid biker or a crazy biker, but 2 would be for most adults. And so taking a look at that, we can see a lot of the city then falls into the what's shown as the yellow and red, which falls into that level 3 or level 4, which means, and unless you're a really experienced cyclist in the city, a lot of the facilities probably don't feel very inviting or encouraging for you to ride on. One other thing we took a look at was we looked at the statewide vehicle crash database over a 5-year period, and so we were dealing with the years 2017 through calendar year 2021. And so just to point out, anything that's happened more recently in the last nearly 3 years since then was not reflected in here. And certainly, I know it's unfortunate, but I know that crashes continue to occur. But so there might be some that aren't reflected in this. So we looked at 5 years worth of crash data. That crash data tells us where does it, as you can see on the map, where does it happen? What's the severity of the crash? Was there a major injury? Was there a fatality? What were some of the contributing factors? Were there bicycles or pedestrians involved? Was freight involved? I mean, there's a lot of different. It's a quite large database with a lot of different data in it. But one of the things we currently do is we look at the frequency of crashes around the city, and if there's hot spots that pop up. And so there were two intersection locations in particular that showed up based on this review of the crash data. One of them is at Main Street and 22nd. And again, this was before 2022. So I'll point out that that's one of the locations that then has subsequently had some of the pedestrian crossing improvements made to it. And so, typically when any kind of a change is made to an intersection, it takes a few years to kind of get a stabilized data set to see, what the resulting impact has actually been. And so at that location, it's probably too early to tell. But that was one of the locations that was showing up. Another one that was showing up is 18th at Long Street. And so that's the all-way stop over next to the schools. One thing that's interesting about that being an all-way stop is that's a location where typically you would not have as many crashes, because people are expected to come to a complete stop, not go through the intersection until it's clear. But given the proximity to the school and all the pedestrian activity too, there's a lot going on in that area, and that's probably contributing to some of that as well. All right, and then one of the other things we took a look at is throughout the city, primarily on Main Street, but also some locations off of Main Street, we collected traffic counts, and the traffic counts are looking at summer traffic levels. Sometimes that's referred to as a peak season, but it's takes into account when there's some of that recreational traffic coming through that may not be stopping in Sweet Home. So taking a look at those traffic volumes, and we ran some calculations to see what's the congestion level at those intersections? How are they operating relative to the adopted mobility standards that the state and the city have? And so given the existing traffic volumes, there's only one intersection that exceeds that engineering metric of congestion, which is the volume to capacity ratio. But that intersection's over at Pleasant Valley Road and Main Street, probably not a surprise to anybody. So that's the one that shows up today based on those calculations. And then looking ahead to the future over the next 20 years with anticipated additional growth in the city, there's a few other locations on Main Street that also show up. And I'll point out too that these are all locations that, to some degree would help feed or provide access to the land in the North Sweet Home area, those connections north of the railroad. And so those three locations that then start to show up are 24th Avenue, Clark Mill Road, and 47th. And so certainly that's something, again, should be no surprise, but as future growth develops up there, there'll be a need to provide access to the highway and the rest of the community. And so obviously with those three different locations, the timing of each of those, when those needs occurs, a lot of it's going to be development driven. So it's really going to be dependent on where and what magnitude is that development happening. But just having the recognition that improvements on the highway, which could be traffic signals, could be roundabouts, probably traffic signals in these locations, but that's something to consider to be on the horizon. All right, and let's go to the next one. And so then with the North Sweet Home area, as I noted, we looked at a variety of things for the North Sweet Home area, but just at a very high level, recognizing that today there's not a good east-west connection in the North Sweet Home area. If somebody's on the west end and they want to get over to the east end, you're driving down to Main Street, then you have to make the turn onto Main Street, and then you're going all the way down before you come back up. So it's important to improve that connectivity and the different land use combinations we've been looking at. We've been looking at street networks that one of the fundamental things would be some kind of an east-west roadway to connect that and to provide a parallel route on the north side of town, similar to the function that Long Street provides on the south of Main Street. So that's one thing, that east-west connection. The other one I was talking about with some of those intersections on the highway, there's going to be improvements needed for connection to the highway. Having the rail going through there, that is an asset, but it's also a constraint where you can't just put any road in there, and you can't just have a full grid system like you might have in a really clean area without other development constraints. So it's really important to make use of and improve those connections to provide connectivity to Main Street. And then as part of that, there's a need for the rail crossing upgrades. A lot of the rail crossings out there are in varying conditions. But none of them look like they were just built, and they can be difficult to get across, whether you're driving, going over the bumps, let alone trying to walk or push a stroller or something like that. All right, so this is the last slide. So just key dates coming up. As I mentioned earlier on, there's a lot of work behind us so far. We've been working with a combined technical advisory and a public advisory committee. We have another meeting with them coming up in December. And then in the new calendar year, we're going to be coming back to the joint group for another work session. We'll be talking about more specifics. You'll have a draft plan and materials there to review. Have an opportunity to get into more of the details, so that then as we roll into the adoption with both groups, that hopefully we've tackled any questions or any sticking points prior to that. All right.
Thank you so much, Garth, for that presentation. And counselors, this is a good time to ask questions, and commissioners, you are also allowed to ask questions as well. Any questions from counselors or commissioners?
Madam Mayor, may I? So I'm excited about this, and I am so thankful for what the commission has worked on and you have done for our city. So we haven't had an update for 20 years when this becomes adopted next year. How long will this plan last our city, first off?
Yeah, that's a great point. Yeah, the last plan was adopted in 2005. And so when as part of the plan, we do plan for growth, and so we plan for 20 years of growth, and so we'd be planning out to 2045. Hopefully we get everything right and it lasts 20 years, but also hopefully we'll be updating it again before then. In different cities, it really depends. There's been some cities where a major change comes up a few years after adoption that no one anticipated. and it might totally change some things up. There's other communities that might go 10 plus years without updating, and that works fine too. But it really depends and varies.
So can I ask? Okay, the next one that I saw was, if you can go to the bicyclist slide, you had a number one, a low.
Oh, that is incorrect.
Okay, so can you explain that to me? Because I'm confused by the number one.
Yeah, absolutely. No, thank you. That was one. I apologize. This is a map that we'd use at our presentation to the PAC and TAC committee a week and a half ago, or 2 weeks ago, and someone had shared that with me during that meeting as well. So that's a case where based on the traffic volume that we had collected and assumptions about speed based on the type of the roadway, in many cases a road like that should be something that's operating fairly well. What we've certainly heard about and are aware of now is with all the cut through traffic and speeding that's happening on that corridor, that's not reflective of a pleasant, low stress biking facility.
Okay, I just was like, hold on, because I have conflicting information and I
Sure.
just want to point out what's accurate and what's not.
Mhm.
And then the last thing is for Pleasant Valley intersection. What's the likelihood based upon this plan and the data that you guys have compiled to getting ODOT to try to help us with that situation?
Yeah, so there's a couple different things with Pleasant Valley. So number one, so first of all, it serves the only river crossing over on the west side. So it's a key route to getting north of the river, and unless you're going down to the reservoir. So it's important for a connection. We're seeing that there's already a lot of delay. I've heard, one of the things with the safety data is it only shows crashes that have occurred, and unfortunately, all the near misses or other scary stories that people have to share don't show up in the data. So, from a safety standpoint, that one wasn't showing up, but certainly we've heard concerns about it, as well as speed of vehicles entering town over on the west side. And so, I think it checks a lot of the boxes of recognizing that there's an operational issue, there's a speed and a safety issue. It's going to need a fix. There's also issues with the sight distance, with some of the vertical curvature out there as well. It makes it very difficult to cross. And I've heard various stories from people about how or if they try to make that turn. Um, back to the ODOT coordination. I think one key thing to note is, I think, um, so Main Street is the highway through the city, and that does fall under ODOT's control. Any control changes on the highway do require sign off from ODOT's traffic engineer. So there is a formal process you have to go through. In addition, because this is also a key freight route, the terminal at the statewide level, one of the categories for freight routes is a reduction review route, which Highway 20 is, and that requires also additional review by a mobility advisory committee. So I think as far as making the case for an improvement, I think we can do that pretty handily. Figuring out exactly what that improvement's going to be. Is it a traffic signal, or is it a roundabout, or something else? I mean, it's going to be too early to tell during this process, but at least through the plan, we'll be able to identify that there is a capacity upgrade needed. And then finding opportunities to partner and get money to get something built. That's something I can't really answer. I mean, that's going to be that could depend on other factors.
Yeah, absolutely. I wasn't asking if you knew if we can get money for it, but just this is the next step that needed to happen for us to bring these concerns to ODOT, to have data to back up what we are saying to them, right? And we've done that with this.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, thank
Mhm.
you.
Yep.
Any other questions from counselors? Commissioners?
I sure do not understand the concept of a roundabout. I mean, just trying to get into Bend, it delays the traffic and it's scary to go through a roundabout. It's all the near misses and horns that are honking, and I just don't understand that. Could you explain the concept behind that?
Sure. Yeah, and certainly I think Bend is probably, I don't know about the Northwest as a whole, but certainly within the state. I mean, Bend has a lot of roundabouts and is very well known for the roundabouts. And so certainly the drivers that are there that go through them on a daily basis, they are more comfortable with them, drive them a little bit more aggressively than someone else, such as myself, might when we're visiting from out of town. But the overall concept about a roundabout is that the key benefit from a safety standpoint are when collisions occur, they're typically fender benders. It removes the really dangerous, serious accidents that you might see at a traffic signal, which would be T-bones and rear ends. Which, when there's an impact, it's at high speed and it's usually pretty severe. So with roundabouts, while it doesn't necessarily take away all the crashes that happen, typically the crashes that do happen are lower speed fender benders. So that's one of the benefits for it. One of the other benefits for it is that it depends. You need to have the right traffic conditions and the right combination of traffic movements for them to be successful. But in a lot of cases too, it actually allows more traffic to get through with less delay because they're not having to stop when they get to it. Maybe they have to wait a few seconds to make that yield maneuver, but then you can quickly get in and make a turn. So I'd say that the safety benefit is probably the biggest overall benefit, but a lot of it also comes down to context, being sure you're putting it in the right place. It works better in some places than others, and also being sure that there's a good combination of traffic volumes.
They make me nervous.
So I have a question. One of the things you talked about were mobility targets. Could you explain that a little bit more?
Be careful what you ask for. Yeah, so essentially the mobility targets, it's a measure of congestion, and different entities measure that in different ways. So ODOT uses what they call a volume to capacity ratio. So you'll have a number between 0 and 1 that essentially says how full is the intersection or how full are the worst movements. A lot of cities though will use something called level of service, which looks at delay. So how long does someone have to wait to make a movement at the intersection? And so it can be measured different ways. In the case of Pleasant Valley and Main Street, because that's on an ODOT corridor, it's not measured by delay. It's measured by how full is the intersection. One of the trade-offs of that methodology in particular, and you'll see it with some of the other intersections today on Main Street, in cases where there's a low traffic volume from the side street trying to make a left turn, they might experience high delay. They might be waiting a minute or more. But from a how full is it standpoint, it doesn't hit that volume to capacity threshold.
So also getting back to Angelita's question about longevity of the plan. So there's no state mandate that says it has to be renewed every certain number of years, or it's a little bit more fluid than that?
It comes down to different factors because sometimes when you want to make different planning decisions, like if you go through a zone change, I think there's a planning. I think it's best to have it, at least another 10 or 15 years beyond where you're at today. So that would be, hopefully you're updating in the next 10 years. But as far as the frequency, I'm not certain on what that mandate is. I mean, there's a variety of plans around the state, and you'll see that there's some cases where they might go through an amendment process, and so maybe the plan was updated 20 years ago, but then there was maybe this section was amended 10 years ago. So it can vary because some aspects of the plan might not change significantly.
And Garth, correct me if I'm wrong. So one of the asking about how many years, like the 20 years out, if we had a significant development in North Sweet Home, that we had a lot of developments that we needed roads and what, that would probably trigger an amendment to that TSP if we had a lot of development. I'm assuming that would be one of those triggering points unless we come through there. It's just question.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it could if it happens in a way that maybe wasn't compatible with the plan, but was still, still made sense and still kind of fit within the city's vision. I'm trying to think of, like one example might be maybe some type of development occurs and through that it's determined that one of the rail crossings needs to close. And so, okay, maybe if that rail crossing closes, and that means that the plan for those other rail crossings, they're going to need to accommodate more traffic. And so that could be a potential series of events.
Did the railroad have any input in this, like their future plans for our tracks here locally?
That they are on the joint committee. Certainly, as we put the final plan together, we'll want their review and comment on everything. But generally speaking, with rail, and I've seen this elsewhere too. Usually, it's amenity that's hard to give up, because there could be different uh, different developments down the line, industrial developments that really would like to have that. So even in cases where the rail doesn't currently get a lot of activity or might be in a spot where it needs a number of improvements to be functioning, whether those be trestles or other crossings, that's a hard jump to make. And so I think overall, trying to keep flexible with that. And being sure, because you don't know what that development look. Maybe there's a development 5 years from now that increases rail activity, and so how can you maintain safe and efficient crossings even with that increased rail crossing, with that rail activity?
Yeah.
So I saw you did the bicycle where it's safe and where it's not safe. And so I'm looking at this and I'm wondering, did we take in consideration the location of the parks and the schools where there might be a higher traffic need for bicycles and pedestrian movement for areas that don't have adequate sidewalks and bike routes?
Yeah, that's a great question. So that a specific item came up a couple weeks ago at our last joint committee meeting. And so as we're looking across the city, so to the first part of your question, this is really based on the state of the facility and not really the context around it. But the context around it, the proximity of the schools or other uses, that's certainly important when we start thinking about, do we want to prioritize some of these segments, or what's most important to us, or do we focus on first? And that's the context where that came up in the discussion a couple weeks ago, talking about both the proximity of schools, but then also in off, not directly on Long Street as much, but also some of the properties that sit off of Long Street. As those properties maybe subdivide and redevelop, there's typically some frontage improvements, and they would provide connections up to Long Street. But then thinking about, if people can get up to Long Street, but then where do you go from there? Because there's the gaps. So those are both items that came up. Yeah, and so they don't show up here where we're identifying the need, but they show up more when we're thinking about are there strategic areas that we would prioritize first. And so that's one thing we heard.
Yeah, Councilor Worley, we did discuss like specific areas where schools were at, Mountain View and Lawn in front of Hawthorne, where we really needed to look at those sidewalks, especially not as much bike paths, but sidewalks especially. So yeah.
concerned even around the parks because going down Sankey, the hill right there, we need a special sidewalk because the students and children, they have no adequate way to walk down that without being on the road and in harm's way. And obviously their ability to get to shopping and other facilities, because that way people will walk more if they're able to do that. But the hill coming down by Sankey is a concern.
Okay.
So, Counselor Gorley, just to inform you, part of the Sankey Park Phase 3 plan is not only an ADA path that will connect Lower to Upper Sankey Park, but it's also a sidewalk that will run down 14th Avenue from the Upper Park to connect to the Lower Park and sidewalks. So there is actually a sidewalk in the plan with that grant that we are currently working on.
Any other questions from counselors or commissioners? You all have done a lot of work on this long process, so I just want to say thank you again. Thanks for all the meetings you've hosted, Garth, and input you've gathered. Is there anything more that you would like to share?
If there's any other questions or concerns that come up, just send them to me and I can coordinate with Garth and we can work on that until we do our next meeting. Sorry, I'm losing my voice. And if you think of anything, we can get that coordinated and work that into the plan for the next work session. So thank you all for being able to be here.
Thank you all as well. And just if you think of anything as you're looking at these, feel free to reach out. So thanks for the work on this, and I'll close this work session at 6:11.